Hello, I'm Wally Taylor from Forum Health Austin. I'm an environmental medicine doctor, and today I want to spend a little time telling you a few things that might be important for you to know about the Epstein-Barr virus. Epstein-Barr virus, or EBV as it's sometimes called, is a human herpes virus, which is a double-stranded DNA virus that is known to cause the disease mononucleosis. To start off with, this Epstein-Barr virus, which is in the family of human herpes viruses, is very common. Now, a lot of times when we catch the Epstein-Barr virus as a child, it doesn't even cause a disease that would be noticeable, or maybe not even more than a common cold. But if you catch it typically a little bit later, like in teenage or even early adulthood, then it can cause a pretty substantial illness, which is what we know mononucleosis. So that's a disease that's characterized by fever, significant fatigue, often sore throat, and enlargement of the spleen. Now, if you don't recover properly, it can even recur. But the problem with the Epstein-Barr virus is whether or not it causes mononucleosis or not, the virus tends to remain in the body. And that's what we're really going to talk about, because in my practice of environmental medicine, we find that Epstein-Barr virus is a major problem for many of our patients, even later in life. So the question about Epstein-Barr virus in the body after the initial entry into the body, whether it causes mono or not, has to do with its persistence. And it definitely is a virus, like many different pathogens now that we know, that have that capability once they get access to the body to remain. Now, one question about this persistence of the virus is just how active is it, whether it's dormant or not. Well, I contend that the virus is never absolutely dormant. So if it remains in the body, which by the way, it does in a high percentage of humans. Some studies suggest that by the time we're in middle age, that there may be an incidence of evidence of persistence of the virus and up to 90% of all humans. So it's very common. But the question is just how active is that virus? And part of it depends on the absolute load of the virus. In other words, is there only one copy of the virus in the body, or are there literally trillions and trillions and trillions? And it turns out that oftentimes it's the absolute load of the virus which really correlates significantly with some of the problems associated with it. Now, there's a lot of reasons that this Epstein-Barr virus in the body can be a problem. We do know, for example, that Epstein-Barr virus is associated with certain cancers. One of the reasons for this is that Epstein-Barr virus happens to be what we call a lymphotropic virus. That just means it has a tendency, as do some other germs, to seek out certain cells of the lymphatic series, which would be like our white blood cells. And it can actually abide within those white blood cells, which it has actually developed as a strategy to avoid elimination by the immune system. Now, a couple of the cancers that we know that are associated with the Epstein-Barr virus, one of them are various lymphomas, particularly the so-called B-cell lymphomas, but also certain epithelial cancers, particularly one that's called Burkitt's lymphoma, and another one that's called nasopharyngeal carcinoma, which has been associated with the Epstein-Barr virus. And there's probably other cancers as well. Now, we do know that the Epstein-Barr virus is a pretty well-developed virus, and it's probably double-stranded DNA, which is more like the human genome, as opposed to some viruses which are simply what we call RNA viruses, like, for example, COVID-19 is an RNA virus. But the genome, or the genes in the Epstein-Barr virus, are actually capable of making probably at least 80, perhaps more, unique and different proteins that are made by the virus itself. Now, several of those proteins will cause the immune system to react. They're what we call antigens. And the antibodies that are made by our immune system in response to those viral proteins are basically the ways that we can sometimes diagnose the Epstein-Barr virus. Things like the nuclear antigen or the capsid antigen. These are just some of the proteins that the virus makes that our immune system will respond in a way that we can measure and tell whether or not the virus is in the body. Now, it turns out that lately they have developed some other ways. One of them is to assess for the actual genes of the virus, and this is a test that we call the PCR test, polymerase chain reaction test. And we're beginning to see that in some cases we might be able to even determine the absolute load of the virus based on the results of the PCR test. So there's more under development about that. But one of the ways that we know that the Epstein-Barr virus is problematic is that it definitely interplays with our own human immune system in a way that often modulates in a not good way the function of our own immune systems. You might actually call this immune suppression, which is fair to say that the actions of the virus may lead to a suppressed immune system. We also know that the presence of the Epstein-Barr virus has been associated with a number of what we call autoimmune diseases. Now, there's a little bit of confusion about autoimmune disease. What I don't think autoimmune disease represents is just an example of where our immune system decides one day to begin to launch an attack against our own self-tissues and cells. No, I believe that actually autoimmune disease represents an effect where the immune system is reacting to the presence of some foreign invader, say some of the proteins and antigens of the Epstein-Barr virus. And as it does so, it actually causes the immune system to cross-react and also injure some of our own human antigens, proteins, cells, and tissues. So it's better to think, in my mind, about autoimmune disease as immune self-injury. And I sometimes tell people it's like friendly fire in a war, where the immune system is fighting the bad guys, in this case a virus, but at the same time, we're getting injured by some of the actions of our own immune system, much like friendly fire in a war. Now, it turns out that the part of the way that the virus tends to act in the body is by also activating and inactivating certain of our human genes. We know that can happen with any number of viruses and even probably other bacteria as well. So that's where products from the virus are acting as gene transcription factors, and sometimes we talk about that as affecting the epigenetics of the patient, which means how the genes are expressed. Now, another way that we believe that the virus itself can play a role is by causing what we call molecular mimicry. And that basically means that the virus makes certain proteins in it that have a tendency to be similar to certain proteins that are within our body. And in some cases, the immune system actually develops confusion. It will respond to the viral antigens or proteins, and at the same time, they can cross-react with some of our human antigens or proteins. This is, say, for example, one way that the autoimmune disease lupus may happen from the development of what we call anti-nuclear antibodies, or in the case of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, it may be because anti-thyroid antibodies are being developed. And there are other examples of where this occurs in other tissues of the body to account for other autoimmune diseases. Now, I want to interject just a little side note at this time. COVID-19 actually turns out to be doing a lot of the same kind of thing in patients. In fact, I had seen recently where every known human autoimmune disease, and there's probably close to 100 that have been described now, have been associated with the COVID-19. Either the autoimmune disease developed for the first time following the infection, or it got significantly worse following the COVID infection. So that's just another example of a more recent RNA virus in our world that is definitely playing a role with this immune self-injury that I was referring to. So now I'm available for consultation through my practice in Austin, and I can be found through the Forum Health website.